In today's video, we'll be recreating Levels by Avicii using nothing but stock instruments, sounds and effects from the core library of Ableton Live Intro. We'll be working on the section that appears around the minute mark, but feel free to expand your project to include other sections of the song. I'll be working today mostly in clip view of Ableton and mostly working with MIDI, so I'm going to go ahead and delete these two audio tracks. Holding Shift, I can select both of them, and using my keyboard, I can hit the delete button. I'm going to set the project tempo to 126 and we can get started making our chords. Using a Mac, I hit Command F to create a search window up here. If you're using PC, Control F will work. And I want to look for grand piano. There's the instrument that we want. I'm going to drag that into our session. Come down and control the volume and the sound of the instrument by turning bright all the way up. I want tone all the way up. I want glue to about 37%. I want soft hard all the way up there. Next, we double click to create a MIDI clip, change the length of it to 2 bars, and copy in the following notes. And there they are. You can pause the video to copy your notes in. I'm going to be using a technique today known as layering to thicken up the sound to get the closer sound to the original song. So what I want to do is right click on that track and hit duplicate. I'm going to search for Fez keys. There it is, and drag that onto the second track of our chords. We want to turn that low pass reso all the way up as well. Select the track and hit Command D this time to duplicate it, Control D if you're using a PC. And what we want to search for is Simpler. Simpler is a very basic sampler, so you can load sounds onto the device here. So what I'm going to search for is Riser White Noise. There it is, and I'm going to click and drag that down onto the Simpler, and there's our sound. I only want to trim to a very small amount. I just want to get some white noise into the song because it will add a nice sheen and a nice top to it. So let's have a listen to that in context. I've brought my volumes down just a little bit because as you layer, obviously the volume goes up. So let's trigger them off together. And we'll adjust those volumes as we go along, but for now, that's pretty good. And to solo each instrument, you can hear that more washed out sound in the Fez keys. And that white noise layer on the top. I know it seems strange to put a white noise in there, but it's, like I say, really going to add that nice crunchy top end that Avicii's music is really known for. Let's move on to that iconic lead synth. Hitting Command F, I'm going to search for Megasaw. There it is. And drag that into our spare MIDI track here. I'm going to adjust the unison to 35%. I want the release to be at 400 milliseconds. And we're going to pull that reverb back a little bit, just to 20% there. Next, I'm going to search for Saturator. Saturator is going to drive into the instrument and distort it a little bit. We want to change the algorithm to soft sine, and I'm going to set that to about 19 decibels. So it's really going to drive quite hard. And I've got my volume adjusted down here so that we don't blast our ears. Next, we want to double click up on our track to create a new MIDI clip and adjust the length to 4 bars. And copy in the following notes. Let's have a listen. That's pretty good, but I think we can use layering to, again, make this a little bit more textural and build it. So I'm going to right click on our track, duplicate, and I'm going to search for horn lead. There's our sound. Drag that onto the track. And I'm going to adjust that filter cutoff to 2000 kilohertz. There we go. Let's have a listen to it all together. So that's really starting to come together. But as we get more developed up here, we want to think about making sure that our project is nice and organized. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this first, hold shift, second and third tracks, because they are all playing the role of the chords, and I want to group those together. I'm going to hit Command G on my keyboard, Control G if you're using a PC, and I'm going to right click up here, rename that to Chords. Same for my lead over here. I'm going to click, hold shift, select, and I'm going to hit Command G on my keyboard, group those, Command R to rename. There's my lead. Now with our project well organized, we can move on to the bass. So we want to search for drift. Bring that into a new track. And again, to remain organized, I'm going to change the color here to something different to my other instruments and rename the track to bass. Now down in our drift instrument, this is a synthesizer. We want to change oscillator 1 down 1 octave, oscillator 2 down to -2 octaves. I'm going to change the volumes here. So I'm going to make oscillator 2 -6. And the filter frequency I'm going to set to 500. Which really takes a lot of our top end off. I'm going to increase the resonance to 0.55. I'm going to search for saturator. So I've removed these top frequencies so that I can control and add them back in as I would like them to be. So I'm going to drag this saturator on. I'm going to bring the drive up to 16 dB. I'm going to change the algorithm to medium curve. I definitely want to bring our volume down. I also want to search for erosion. So the saturator is going to add back a lot of that texture up the top end of our spectrum, and erosion is going to do the same. It just gives us a stronger sound overall. So when I drag this in, we want that on the noisy setting. Okay, so I searched for erosion and dragged in noisy. Double click to create a MIDI clip. Change the length to 4 bars and copy in the following notes. Let's have a listen. I've just brought the volume down just a little bit because I know it's going to be strong. We'll listen to the effects with and without. So we're on our piano roll page here where our MIDI notes are. I want to change back over to our instruments. So down here, you can swap between those, or you can hit Shift Tab on your keyboard. So let's have a listen with and without. As you can tell, it's a much, much weaker sound. The saturator really gives it a lot of gain and drive. And then if you listen for the noisy erosion, it just creates a bit of air on top of that, which is really nice. Let's move on to our drums. We'll be doing our drums in 2 parts. So to start with, let's search for a simpler. And this is what we're going to use for our kick drum. And all the other percussion will go onto a drum rack in a different track. And I'll show you why in a moment. We need to search for kick 808 tone 8K. There we are. We're going to drag that onto our simpler. To that, we're going to add a saturator. I'm going to put that drive up to 11. Head up into our track and create a new MIDI clip. It only needs to be 1 bar. On the C3, on the first of every beat of our 16th notes there. And just adjust that volume there. Great. Let's make a new MIDI track by hitting Command Shift T if you're using a Mac, or Control Shift and T if you're using a PC. I'm going to make this the same color as my bass drum. There we are. And I'm going to search for drum rack. Drag that onto the track. And we want to search for shaker acoustified. There we are. And I'm going to drag that onto C1 of our drum rack. And I'm going to take the acoustified 2 and put that on D1. Next, I want to search for clap acoustified dry. Pop that onto F1. And we're going to double click to make a MIDI track. And we want to put our clap on the 2 and on the 4. And then we want to draw in our pattern for our shakers. And I can copy that just by selecting those and hitting Command D to duplicate. Copy those out. Let's have a listen. Now that shaker acoustified is a little high, so I'm going to go and adjust the gain of that in the drum rack. Somewhere around -5 sounds good to me. So to keep organized, I'm going to rename this just simply kick, and then our next track is our percussion. The reason I kept these two tracks separate is because I want to use this kick to create a pumping effect in the track. So in the melodic elements, we can affect those using this kick. What I want to do is select all of my melodic elements here and group those groups. So hitting Command G or Control G for you if you're using PC, I've now created a group of all of these melodic elements in our track. So what I want to do with this is search for a compressor and drag that onto our big group of tracks. I want to set the attack to really low, the release to really low, the ratio to all the way up, and bring the threshold down to about -25. I can open up the sidechain section of this compressor and select that we want it to sidechain, and where we want to get the audio from is our kick. So what this does is it's like a volume automation basically. So whenever it reads that it's gotten some information from the kick, it will press down on the volume and the kick will shine through and it'll create a pumping effect. Let's have a look and have a listen. So you can see it working there. Every time that kick comes in, that volume decreases sharply and then gets released back up. And to hear it without the kick, you can hear that pumping effect. And that's a pretty iconic sound all across dance music. So to keep organized, I'm going to group these drum tracks, and we can move on to creating the final instrument that we're going to be working on today. I'm going to hit Command Shift T to create a new MIDI track. I'm going to change the color to something unique to the others, and we're going to create our ARP sound. So the instrument that we're going to be looking for is drift again. Drag that into the track there, and we want to set our oscillator 1 to -1. Our attack, we're going to move to 12 milliseconds. Sustain, we want to move to 20%. Release, we want to move to 20 milliseconds as well. Now we're going to do something interesting with this. I'll draw my notes in first and make that 4 bars. So we're pretty high up here. We'll have a quick listen to that. Great. I'm going to head back over to my instrument page down here. And what I noticed in the original track was on this instrument, this ARP instrument, Avicii changed the length of the note throughout, which added a certain movement and interest to this instrument. I'd like to sort of explore that a little bit myself. So I'm going to click on the release here. So that's the last thing I've clicked on. And I'm going to head back over to my notes page where I can jump into envelopes. And we can do something called automation. Automation is simply you can control using dots, basically, with this line here as to what value, where this line moves and how much it sort of affects whatever it is that you're choosing to affect. Now for me, as the last thing I clicked on our drift instrument was the envelope release, which is how long the note rings out for, that's what shows up here. So I can change this to any number of effects or elements of that synth that we can modulate. So it's quite a rabbit hole to go down with automating. You can automate so many different elements. Now I'm going to click and create a little node there, and I'm going to bring that up to about 30. And at the end, I'm going to click and create another one, and I'm going to bring that up to about 2.5. Now what we're affecting is time. So the length of time that this note rings out. So listen to what happens as time passes on this clip. So you can hear the notes really start getting washed out along this sort of part of the timeline, almost to the point where they're creating little chords of themselves, which is a really, really cool technique that Avicii used. And it just, like I said, added movement to the song. I thought it was really cool. What I've created here isn't an actual perfect representation of what's happening in the song. I just thought it was a technique that was really worth highlighting. There's another technique I'd like to explore as well. I noticed in the original that in certain moments, it's almost like the instruments were on a record player and the kill button was hit. There's like a sort of sound. It's really cool. And I think it adds a lot of interest to the track. So while we've faithfully recreated the song, we do not have that element yet. So I'm going to do something else that's a little bit different. And I'm going to move back to our grand piano. Now, if you recall at the start of the video, I said we would mostly be working in MIDI. This is where we're going to actually change things up a little bit. I want to be able to pitch shift some of these notes so that they create that sound. Every instrument that you use as a MIDI instrument has certain limitations. So I want to actually work with this piano in audio, where I can have different sets of control over the audio file. So I need to turn this MIDI clip into an audio clip. So I'm going to right click on the instrument and I'm going to hit freeze and flatten track. Now what that does is it takes any effect, any instrument, anything that's going on that track, basically bounces it as it is. So what we have here, you can see that it's gone from MIDI notes on the piano roll to actual sound waves in an audio file. So I'm going to select all of this, and again, moving into our envelope section here, we can choose different things to automate. Now I want to select clip and I want to select transposition. So let's find the note that we want to adjust the pitch of. So that's that one there and that one there. Easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I've got my transposition selected there. I'm going to click a node in and out, and then I'm going to bring this down to -24, which means that over the course of this time, it goes down and then back up 2 octaves. So it goes down 2 octaves and then goes straight back up to being normal. I'm going to change my warp algorithm here, because that's what we're working with here. This is called warping in Ableton. I'm going to change this warp algorithm to complex, and I'm going to copy that to our second bar by selecting the first 2 bars, and I'm going to hit Command D to duplicate that to our next section that needs to be affected. Pretty cool. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to keep it in MIDI with our Fez keys. So I'm going to go to the same area in envelopes. I'm going to make sure that I've got MIDI control selected and pitch bend. And that's exactly what we're working with here. So let's find the note. Perfect. And we'll bring that pitch bend down like so. Let's listen to it in context. So that's pretty cool. I'm feeling though that it's getting a little bit lost in there, so you can't really hear it. So the final step today is to go through every channel and do a little bit of a mix down and get our volumes right and think about what effects we might need to add so everything sort of has better cohesion throughout. So I'm going to jump over to arrangement view to do this by hitting the tab button on my keyboard. And there we have all of our instruments listed out. The reason I'm doing it in arrangement view is because you've got a little bit more specific access to dial in your volumes. Now we're going to be looking at two things today in the mixdown, and that is going to be our volume or our gain for our track. And then underneath it is a reverb send. And what that basically does is send some of the volume from, say, this grand piano over to our reverb return track. And so some of the grand piano will be affected by the reverb. So I'm just going to basically list off where I landed in this mixdown, and you can add that to your project as well. I'm also not going to be worrying about changing our group volumes. That's not necessary. So I'm going to go straight to our grand piano volume and set that to 0. Set the reverb send to 11. Our Fez keys are going to be -9 and -14 for the reverb send. Our white noise I'm going to set to -5, and I'm not going to worry about sending any of that to reverb. Our mega saw we're going to set to -15 and -15 for the reverb. Horn lead -17. Bass we're going to get to -17. Our kick we're going to get to -3. And our percussion also -3. We want a bit of air on the percussion there, so I'm going to put -17 to the reverb. And our ARP -3 and -10 to the reverb. Finally, I'm going to search for brick. And right here we have our brick wall compressor, and I'm going to drag that onto our main, which is our final channel, which is everything. So what it's going to be doing is squeezing everything together there. I'm going to bring that threshold down to -25. And let's have a listen. And there we have Levels by Avicii. Feel free to expand on the project by adding other elements or other sections of the song. See you in the next video.